They're gonna catch my checklist. That's a bad bet.
GM, Never Fake Podcast fam, episode 35, coming at you live. I'm Goodmonth. Have a quick announcement before we get into today's topics. Sadly, Faxx will no longer be a co-host on Never Fake Podcast. I know it's incredibly sad. He's gonna be taking some time, spending some much needed time with his fam, and he's pivoting away from the metaverse space here for a little while until he decides to come back. Everybody has the opportunity to change their opinion on new information and any type of change of mindset that they have. So we wish Faxx the best. Flowers to you, Faxx. Thank you for everything you did up to episode 35, which we're on today. You will see me and Faxx interviewing Thread Guy. And overall, I just want to say thank you, Faxx. Wish you the best. You're always welcome back on this pod. As for the future of the pod, we're going to take a 2-week break. We haven't taken a break since we started this thing. Episode 35, been at it almost every week. And we're going to take a 2-week break and figure out, are we going to continue it with a new co-host? Or are we going to kind of pivot the show, go a little bit more macro, given the space in the market, given the time in the market? We'll keep you updated. But for the time being, smash that like, smash that retweet, give us some feedback. If you have any interest of coming on the show to co-host in the interim dance, we'll take it. We're here for that. But I just want to thank you, Faxx, personally. Thank you so much. You killed it on the show. I think you brought a lot of attention to a lot of different topics, and we gave a lot of people some free mental upgrades. And that's what this was always about. As for today, we're talking about Thread Guy, a young entrepreneur in the space that's all about building content, all about getting people's attention and, making people think a little bit different. He really brought light on the scene in the Threadition side of things when Jack, Jaleel, Bordila, and him lit the space on fire with his platform. And every time I tuned into Twitter Spaces or any type of podcast after that, a lot of people went into his background. He's a young guy. He doesn't have that long of a background. He has an interesting story. But today, we're focused on the trajectory of Thread Guy, where he's going to angle his profession in the future, talk about the ApeCoin DAO special election run that he had, and then also talk about the AIP that he's put up for the ApeCoin DAO to release some treasury to allow him to keep doing his thing as long as it's aligned with ApeCoin DAO. So without further ado, let's get into it. TG, welcome to the show, baby boy. What's going on?
What is good, man? Good to fucking see you all. Excited to be on. We finally got it in, so I'm ready for a chat here.
That's right, dude. And with this podcast, you get to save those vocal cords a little bit. You don't have to yell as much for that Twitter space engagement. You don't have to yell as much to keep people's attention. But I want to know how the vocal cords doing.
They're hanging in there, man. A lot of tea, a lot of hot coffee, but they're holding up all right.
You're good, man. You're up there with T Swift on the Eras tour with how long you got to get up there on stage and do the thing. It's I hope you're not developing any nodes, rather staking nodes on the chain. But I got to ask straight up, how bored are you? How bored are you of people asking your background during this tradition cultural phenomenon? Every time I've popped in during this, I've heard your background story 18 times. We're not going to do any of that. How bored are you of that?
It gets a little repetitive, but you would think I would have the story down pat. But every time I'm thinking, I'm stressing about it a little bit. But it's a lot of repetition on some of these pods.
There's something. It's something new here. So we're recording this about 3 weeks past, maybe 3-4 weeks past Threadition. Cultural phenomenon. We said 3 episodes ago, I'm not sure if you caught it, that specific instance was going to start a new PFP standard, almost like a new protocols for PFPs. And we're right on the back of set 11 with the Pepins that Jack Butcher and Luca Nets popped off. Can we get your takes right there on how you're feeling about the Pudgy Penguin Pepin kickoff here and what you think's coming next? And if you could tie it into just your experience with Threadition and how close you are to the Pepin network right now. What do you got going on in that brain?
So I loved it. I saw the Pepin Pudgy Penguin sort of collaboration, and I was all over it. And even before it was an opt-in, like official set, I thought it was so poetic because you mentioned it, right? Sort of the thread edition was like a big time culture moment and broke some barriers with the traditional like scarcity luxury sort of PFP meta where it's like 10K exclusive club, expensive. If you know, you know. If you don't, get out of here. And I thought the thread edition was so special because it was like $2 entry, accessible to everyone. And then Pepin more broadly is like, there is no floor price. It's free. Throw your fucking JPEG in the generator, click it once. You got your new PFP. And I saw that and I was like, this is a new wave. It's like the whole space is participating in this thing, having fun, enjoying this movement, and they're not spending anything. And I saw that and I was like, yo, probably just like you, like this is going to stick. This is going to be a trend. And when they first posted the Pepin sort of like pudgy collab before it was an opt-in said anything, it was the same day D-God Season 3 was supposed to drop. And I thought it was so funny because one click, one post, wasn't an NFT, didn't have a floor price, didn't have any significance in price. And it took over the timeline, like took it over. And then, Jack Butcher and Jaleel are in the trenches, like making derivatives. Faxx had a red one. Shit was fire. And it quite literally took over the timeline with no expectation of profit, no monetary value, no floor price, no anything. And it was like a one-to-one tie-in with what we saw with like the thread edition in that entire saga. And it was just funny that it was like the same day as like a pretty major luxury scarcity PFP drop without any of the price speculation, without any of the financial upside. And that to me, like seeing that drop, even before it was a drop, just seeing it take over the timeline sort of confirmed my earlier thesis that like, yo, this is going to stick. Like this is sticky. This like mass supply, mass accessibility, fuck the speculation, fuck the price. Like this has real deal staying power. And of course, I mean, Jack Butcher he just figures out how to tie it in, how to make every post just feel like have so much substance and feel so significant. So I really think that the Pudgy Penguin drop was a pretty significant moment.
Yeah, when you say that, right, when you kind of like rehash that moment for us, it makes me realize like, dude, people are out here to have fun. So like the difference is like people are making these like penguin derivatives. They're just JPEGs. They're vibing on it. There's not this like overhang of like financial uncertainty hanging over them, right? Compared to this like pressure cooker situation of season 3, where people are like been anticipating this, and then there was delays, and then there was delays. It's thrilling, but it's like also terrifying. And most people aren't fucking here for that, dude. Most people aren't here to watch their net worth drop 50% in 2 days. They're here to network, they're here to learn, they're here to have fun. And it's like, I love that you kind of contrasted these two like very different experiences in the space. And it begs the question, guys, and I want to ask you good first, like, was this whole idea of having these finite number of JPEGs, PFPs that become like kind of like out of touch for most people, like completely off base? Like, was it totally a miss?
In this market, it's a miss. It wasn't a miss in 21. It was exactly what you needed to do. I mean, there was so much irresponsible money floating around risk assets just outside of Web3 everywhere. From housing to risk assets in the market, stocks. Nobody was buying bonds. There wasn't an interest rate to buy a bond, really. You had corporate companies buying junk bonds and such. So yeah, I mean, it was the thing to do in 21. Everyone that says it wasn't, they missed out. And it goes back to like '08 with the home mortgages. That was going on from like '04 to '08. People were selling subprime mortgages, and there were a lot of people that jumped in that space and cashed out big on that wave before it crashed. So it was exactly what we should have been doing in 21. But 23, with the indication of 22, we had to come up with something different. We had to come up with something that was going to catch our attention a different way. Now, if we're comparing it to DGods here, no hate on that community. That community's tough. That community's strong. That community's also a lot younger than other communities. So, a lot of people in like Bored Ape Yacht Club and CryptoPunks, they're 35 plus or so. So they look at these, young 20 kids and they're like, oh, they're off their rocker. Like, no, they're not. They got 10 years of rolling dice. Like, this is the time to absolutely be risky and go all in on it. Like, when I was their age, I was popping stocks of Tesla when everyone was saying they were going to go bankrupt, and bang, bang, ching, ching, we here, So they're doing exactly what they should be doing at that age. And they're fucking around and finding out right now. But I actually think that spirit that's wrapped around that DGOD community, it just needs to be pivoted. Like I actually think Frank is kind of throwing in the towel of the old meta on this the wrong way. Like, I think he should be recreating that old energy and leaning on his strengths, which we could talk about a little bit later in the show, because I got some questions for TG on that, but I'll throw it back to you, Faxx.
He did put out this emo video. He loves to pull those heartstrings, and he wrapped it up with back to square one. So maybe that is the vibe. And TG, I mean, I think you're closer to kind of the core of the foundation of that project. And I understand you were living in LA for a while, probably hanging with Frank and this kind of stuff. So I think you probably have a completely different perspective than Goodmonth on this. Like what happened, dude? Like, what happened with this DGOD season 3? Like, why do you think this happened? And where do you think this is going to go?
Yeah, I'll preface by saying I have some level of bias. I'm a pretty major Frank DGods fan. I don't hold any. I'm a Utes holder. I think there's a couple things here, and I think the first, the major underlying issue or problem that happened is the sort of overhyping to a level where it just can't match expectations. Like, it just got so absurd for many reasons. I think one of the reasons is the NFT market went to shit, and every other project in the process of hyping up season 3, every other project went to shit. Like, all these, everything we were hyped for, Ether, flop, Azuki, Elemental, flop. It's like flop after flop after flop. And it got to a point where it was not only was the season 3 hype so astronomical, but it was also they're the last one standing. What else were we excited for and looking forward to other than season 3? And I think it got to the point where it was just expectations were just no longer aligned. And when we hit the actual rollout, it was yes, did they miss the mark? I personally preferred the first season 3 art. I just want to say that. Yes, did they maybe miss the mark with some of the community members on what they were expecting with the art? Yes. Could the points parlor have had some better rewards and got rid of, some of the things that were obviously going to get flooded on Twitter? Yes. But I also think there's a pretty big aspect here where it was no matter what they delivered, we know what floor price was going to do. We know what people on Twitter were going to say and be upset with it. But I think there's one point that I want to make, sort of tying this back into a Pepin before I forget it, is that you look at the season 3 style, which is 6 months of hype. And no one does it better than Frank. No one, like you said, pulls at your heartstrings, makes you feel some type of emotion, good, bad, sad, and different than Frank DGods. But you look at how much power and just how many tweets, how many spaces, how much hype went into that process versus Jack Butcher Thread Edition, 1 tweet. Jack Butcher, Pepin Pudgy Penguin, 1 tweet. And I look at that and it's just wow. Look at the network effects from the Thread Edition. It was 1 tweet. And of course, I'm in the background, retweeting and doing my thing and pushing this thing along. But at the same time, Jack Butcher, 1 tweet. 1 tweet. No hype leading up to it. There's no deadline circle. There was no date. I look at that and, Frank made a couple tweets and he was like, content over hype. And while I do think hype in a speculative market, it can't go away, right? It's always going to be, hype is always sort of going to drive these speculative assets when, most of them are vapor and utility isn't really real. But I think there's a lot of truth to that statement, the content over hype. And I think Jack Butcher really embodies that. And when it comes down to it, it's like he has something fucking dope in the chamber. He knows he does. It doesn't require like a 3-month Spaces tour for it to hit the mark. It's one tweet. And that to me is just like, every time I see it, I'm mind
bars, dude, bars. So yeah, it's about like expectations, right? So in the case of Jack Butcher and Pepin, like the kind of that hype phase at the very beginning, there was like a volatility and like a lot of ups and downs. People were trading it crazy, but now the expectations are kind of set, but you don't really know like what's going to come next or when. And there's not a bunch of like hype towards that. It's just suddenly, boom, this thing kind of like escalates naturally, organically with the tradition. It goes freaking nuts, right? Same thing with nobody's expecting like this collaboration. Obviously, once that kind of first image came out, people started speculating about it. But like from the time when you first saw the Pepin kind of like as it is to the time that it became set 11 was very short amount of time. And like, boom, one thing leads to another and people get hyped. So I think like that's the big takeaway here, right? Is like setting some baseline of expectation where you have people who are engaged, interested, but not like, overly like hyped and like tripping on like this like thing that's on the horizon. You hit them when they're not expecting it and you roll with that.
And then one other thing I'll add, and obviously this is a hardcore community member, but it's like Jack Butcher has figured out a way with Pepin specifically to put an end date on it. And not only put an end date, but basically tell you exactly what to expect. It's like, there's going to be 200 of these opt-in drops. And somehow was able to put an end date, tell you exactly what to expect, but keep the same level of like speculative hype. Like, who's the next drop? Like, is it going to be nouns? Is it going to be X copy? Is it going to be Beeple? So it's like, you literally know what is coming, but then there's 189 drops to speculate on. And I think that there's something there that is like, whoa. Because think about it. Like, for these PFP projects, I'm calling out Pepin a PFP project. Like, how does it end? How do you get out? How do you tie it off with a bow and finish the collection? Like where does Azuki end? There is no end date. Like,
I think
what is the next step? It's always
yeah. I think what you're getting at, TG, is like Butcher has the peaks and troughs built in. Like we know when an announcement comes, it starts to ramp. People are opting in. They start familiarizing themselves with the pack of 80. And then the reveal happens and there's a drop off. If you don't get it, there's a drop off. There's a feeling of like, fuck, I got to go in on secondary, or like, how are these going to move? And you see the secondary prices and it feels a little bad, but it's part of the process, right? You're peaking. Like Jack has this peak and trough programmed and it's measured. So you know that like you're still holding something that's going to get revealed. So you're not, getting too down bad and feeling bad. And then also, he's moving on to the next drop after one if you get a reveal. So, does that kind of resonate with what you're saying?
Yeah, it does. And it almost like there's never this feeling of like, fuck, man, the hype drop just flopped and now it's going to be 9 months before we maybe expect something new. Like, what is coming, but there's also like so much room to speculate on like who's the next artist. I think it's so like fascinating, and I still haven't been able to really wrap my mind around the fact that he's like literally put an end date on this project. Like, we know what is going to happen from set 1 to set 200. We just have no idea who it is. And I think for most of these PFP projects, it's like where they're going, what the North Star is, and how this plays out is like completely up in the air. And I think that's part of the reason that the hype runs rampant and the speculation gets out of hand, because it's like you don't really know what to expect. And almost always it's underwhelming. Jack Butcher, he's like told you what is going to happen. And I think that there's something that's just like mesmerizing within that collection.
Yeah. And I will note, like, Pepin would be slow in a bull. So, like, the fact we're getting Pepin in a bear, and I know Jack knows he's a bottleneck and he feels like he's a bottleneck, like, it is the time and place for this mechanism. So, whoever's studying this to figure out how to scale this in a bull is on the right path.
I think that's a good point. That it would be. I actually hadn't thought about that. I think it's a good point. I think it would be fairly slow in a bull because here's the thing about the hype and the speculation. It runs rampant in the bull because people love it because they're just trying to make the next 10x. It's like, like I've got into some deep conversations on spaces about how, well, hype and speculation won't lead the next bull. But it's like, of course it will. Because in the bull, it's like, what founder can sell you the biggest dreams like right now to make your price do a 10x? Like, of course it's going to lead the next bull because it has to, because that's what we want in the bull is we want the founder that can make the biggest promises that are 6 months, a year out. So we don't have to actually see what comes of it, but we can just buy and speculate. Like, of course it's going to lead the next bull.
100p. Hype is not a bad thing. It really isn't. I mean, people wouldn't be whipping Teslas if there were no hype. Like, hype matters. And I think the thing is, like, on our last pod that we're about to drop today, you know, Bored Elon made the comparison of like Johnny Ive versus Steve Jobs. And like Frank has more Steve Jobs qualities and Jack has more Johnny Ive qualities. And the reality, I think, is that Frank needs a bunch of departments. Frank needs a bunch of R&D going on so that he can go out and hype. Like, Frank's strengths are hyping. And I actually think if Frank gets away from hyping, sure, maybe hyping the D-Gods collection or the Utes collection isn't where he should direct that hype. But I do believe Frank should hype. Like, Elon has promised the Cybertruck for 4 years on hype, and people still want it. So, like, Frank should hype. He just needs more things to hype.
I agree. I think like the worst thing you could do to Frank is like silence him. Like, we want Frank, because that's the thing. And he touched on it a few times. You know, he was like, when we bridged to ETH, I felt like I had to change my playbook to like follow the ETH playbook. But like, look at the ETH founders and these quote unquote blue chips that are silent, that are in the shadows. Like, look at the floor price and like fair. Everyone's down, but at the same time, like, Frank at his best is like when he's on 6 spaces a day and he's going on the spaces bender and he's on the timeline fucking firing because he hypes you up. He gets you excited. You buy into his vision because it's real. And that's part of the reason I think they're so good at like crisis control, damage control, is because it's like when the stakes are at the highest and it's polarizing. People are upset. People are angry. They're throwing fastball, 110-mile-an-hour questions at him. And he answers them like beautifully, like so gracefully, so beautifully. And I would imagine he talks a lot of people off the edge when he goes on these spaces like that first sort of like Q&A that he did after season 3. You know, I'm like thinking in my head, like, man, there's nothing he could say to like fix this. 20 minutes in, I'm looking at the D-Gods floor price. I'm surfing OpenSea. I'm like, man, he just gets it. Yeah, it's like silencing him is like, it's like neutering him. It's like, it doesn't work. It does not work.
Because you know who wins on the good announcements is Frank, and who loses is Frank. Like, he's the one who takes so much of the blow for his team when there's mess ups. And I think he feels that integrity to do so. But also, like, I'd like to see Frank off the leash more, because he's trying to scale, he's trying to operationalize, but the whole reason why he's in this position is because he is Frank. And there's no better time in a bear right now, especially with your community behind you, to just unleash on your strengths. And I have a personal opinion that like Frank needs to be making movies. Like, Homeboy has a TED Talk when he's 17, 16 years old about how he wants to make movies. He's watched more movies than most people on NFT Twitter. He's watched more emotion for that reason. He's been able to break it down. If Homeboy just goes and makes a movie about all the shit he's created and all the things that are about to come, the price of a D-God's irrelevant because people are going to be paying attention regardless. Like, Frank needs to be unleashed on the film, yo.
That's a hot take. So, TG, like when you think about that from a perspective of content, right? So, you spent a lot of time on Spaces. I know you've been, doing some interviews too with Rug Radio. Have you thought about kind of like where do you go from here with your platform? Like, can you scale that into another form of content? Can you make reality TV-esque stuff? I've seen different kinds of like comedic clips that you've done with K Money. I've seen some different kind of forms of the content, but I'd love to kind of like pivot this conversation a little bit into where does content creation go from here? Like, how do you feel about the changes that have been rolled out recently with the X app? It seems like they want to favor video more. Like, can we just pick your brain on the content side of things a little bit?
I mean, I think that's been sort of the most difficult transition so far. Is it's sort of like figuring out, especially as we've gone bare here and the numbers have dropped and listeners are down and wallets trading NFTs are down. It's like, how do I bottle this skill, this ability to create content, the spaces, whatever it is, the tweeting, and expand it? And it's I think about it every day. It's my biggest bottleneck right now is like, if I pulled up my phone right now and the Thread Guy Twitter is suspended, like what happens, right? It doesn't exist on YouTube. It doesn't exist anywhere. TikTok doesn't exist anywhere else. And I think it's been like a mental battle I go back and forth on, where it's like, one, yo, you idiot, get the fuck off of Twitter and expand. But at the same time, it's like uber bullish on crypto, uber bullish on NFTs, uber bullish on Elon and X. So like it makes a lot of sense for me to really double down on Twitter and the crypto community specifically. But at the same time, I think the most simple transition is like video. And I need to get on video. Like the Spaces should be a video show. Like there should be a podcast like you all are doing, you crush it, that I should be doing on video. And even if it doesn't mean 100,000 YouTube subscribers or 1 million on TikTok, it's like at the lowest level, I really want to lock in a video. And I got a couple opportunities. Like I was able to go out to Vegas for the Azuki event with Rug Radio. And we had, shout out to Jordan from Pudgy, filmed the whole weekend, got a shit ton of content. I'm going to have an announcement actually in a couple days here that for some upcoming IRL events, I'm going to do the same thing. So I think like that's one of the easiest ways to tie in video is like filming these IRL events and like filming the day to day in LA and like going to meet NFT people and going to these conferences and, going to the proof venue. Like before I even expand and start doing like non-NFT shit, like figuring out how to weave in the video side of it first and foremost, I think is like, that's the first step for me and somewhere I really want to double down, because it's always like, there's always the duality of like, cool, you have an NFT audience, like now go somewhere else. But it's also at the same time, like, this is sort of this is like my edge is crypto and NFTs. And it's like where I feel like I have the best understanding. It's where I feel like the community is the strongest. And it's also where I feel like the world hasn't caught up to. So it's like, yes, I would like to and plan to do content that is not related to crypto, that's not related to NFTs, have a podcast and bring people on that are not in the space. But at the same time, like, to lose the edge, I think is crazy. So it's sort of figuring out how to like, one, tie in video and other platforms baseline, but then also like expand the content without losing sort of the home. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I think one of the big things that is one of your strengths that I pick up on is you show how NFTs and crypto Twitter is fun in a time when the mainstream clowns on it. You pop on Netflix and watch a show. It's like, if you make it to episode 2 of a new show and they haven't punked on NFTs yet, like you probably should turn off the show because it's like, it's not relevant. But the fact of the matter is like, you've actually been able to show how a lot of this can be fun without that financial speculation. And, I'll say one thing, when you first started out on your Twitter spaces, I tuned in here and there, And then when you started getting your spaces, I really hadn't tuned in too much. And then I started popping in probably about 3 weeks before the Threadition thing happened. Ironically, you might have like tweeted about Jack Butcher or something that popped me in there. But it was refreshing. Like you were engaging like with the way that you use your pitch and your voice. And I know people just call that screaming and they call that yelling, but it's not. Like you're actually engaging listeners out of passivity with your tones, which is impressive. I love that. But the thing that really really caught my attention is like you're an MFer when it comes to learning. Like you aren't just a talking head. Like just yesterday, I heard you talking about D-God's Machi and the liquidity and the blur side. And I think it was Wizard of Soho was giving a take, and you pulled the whole show like on that take and started really exploring that take and learning more about it. So with that said, like flowers to you on that. If people haven't given you flowers on the fact that like you're really ramping up as an educator and I think a self-learner, they should be throwing you flowers. So do that, people. But on top of those flowers, like talk to me about your experience in learning. Like Faxx just asked you about scaling your content. You're obviously exploring that question mark there. But now when it comes to like how much you've learned with the 2 years in this space, like where are you today that you weren't 24 months ago?
Yeah. I appreciate the flowers, and it's great to know you've been tuning in. I mean, I bought my first NFT in 2020 with NBA Top Shot because I had no clue what crypto was or NFTs, but I understood sports cards, right? Made a little money in Top Shot, put the shit away.
And we should note, like you were using Hypebeast as exit liquidity, right? Like you were in the luxury goods, supreme
the
drop
reselling, all
shipping
that.
game, right?
Yeah,
Which it goes far here. It goes far here.
Yeah, it fucking does. There's actually a ton of parallels, and we could get into that too. But I created the Thread Guy account in August of 21. And if you think back, August 2021 was like the craziest month in NFTs. I mean, I was like, if you look at some Dune charts, I mean, it's tough to beat August ever. And so I pop into this space, and it's like max euphoria. You got like the beanies of the world preaching and all these people promising these massive dreams. And it's like, no one knew what they were doing. No one really understood the space, but it was also like impossible to navigate, right? Coming in with like basically zero context. It's like, what the fuck is going on here? So I had to figure out, like I knew crypto Twitter was the game because I came from reselling and Twitter was the game there. It was the same thing. You had the influencers, the founders, just at a smaller scale. So I knew like, if I'm going to do something here, like crypto Twitter is where I need a platform. But I'm like, man, I don't know. I know nothing about crypto. I'm not a dev. I can't code. I can't talk about smart contracts. I'm not a founder. I'm definitely not a whale. I can't come out here and buy massive bags. I'm not a trader. I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, what can I do? And I was like, well, I can learn and I can write. So I realized there's a gap in the fact that we have all these NFT projects that are out, that are popping, but there's nowhere to find any information on them. No one knows anything about them. And so I started, the Thread Guy, which was like, I would go in a Discord, join the Cool Cats Discord, and I would just like read every announcement and basically like GPT regurgitated to you in a thread. And so like my first like 0 followers to like 10K was like nothing but writing threads about projects because that's all I could do. But what I didn't realize at the same time is like, I'm starting to learn like what these projects are, why these ones hit, why these ones don't. And, it wasn't until like April, May that I started doing spaces. Right. I mean, shout out to the Lizard, Shillin' Bill, started co-hosting spaces with him. And I remember, we're 2 weeks in and he told me, he was like, yo, you either got to fucking get better like now, or we can't do this anymore. It's a bad look for my brand. And so I had to learn. Seriously, the company's on my ass. Like you sound like shit, and I had to like learn how to do spaces. And
Hold
I think
on. Do you think that that's like, was he just trying to push you, or do you think he really felt that way? Because the thing about the lizard is he rarely says what he means, man. Like he's always capping on shit.
The lizard created a monster because the lizard was worried about you overtaking him. And so he was trying to get you to back off and you called his bluff. That's what happened.
I'll say this. You know, the relationship is what it is. I don't talk to him much publicly or privately anymore, but I learned more about how to be a content creator from that dude than like anybody. Like straight up. I mean, this space is like, as we know it, with the hands and like turning it into a show. Like, I mean, that was him. It was like, I'm not afraid to say it. Like that was 100% him. And he pushed me a lot. Like he forced me to get better at this shit because it's like, yo, if you're gonna swim with the sharks, like you better be able to play. And I think that the spaces was a big thing for me too, because I mean, bro, I fucking hate public speaking. Like I hate public speaking. I was always the kid in school. Like I hated it. Presentation on the Promethean, like fuck that. I hated it. And I had to like really sort of push myself at spaces. And then once I got over the hump, I realized like, yo, I love this shit. And that was a big learning thing for me as well, where it's like, yo, if you just throw yourself out there and just like send it and just like fuck the rest, fuck the response, fuck the listeners, all of that, just like send it, you can pick up things really fast. And that was a big learning thing for me as well. But the one thing I'll say, bringing it back, not to monologue for too long, is my TLDR in like the sports card scene, early 2020, is I basically I was broke as shit, had no money, but I saw the collectible market going crazy. I was like a freshman in college. And I basically like harassed this, basically a sports card alpha group owner, gave me a free membership to this group. And it was like $100 membership. I couldn't even pay for it. And he gave me a free month in this group. And I'm a pretty hardcore NBA fan, you know, big sports guy. And I'm in this group for like 20 days and I'm watching these alpha callers make these calls, these market reports, whatever it is. And I'm like, man, I could do this, what these people are doing. Like, they don't know shit. I could do this. And so like, I basically made an Instagram account and posted a call every day for like a month, just to like record it in a public forum. And, you know, the market was up only. So basically everyone hit in a month. We're up like 2x. And I basically took that Instagram account and I went around to a bunch of alpha groups and I was like, yo, this is me. Like I do card calls. You know, your current provider does one a week. I do one every day. Like, here's my success. Like, let me get a free trial. And someone gave me a free trial. You know, it happened to be during a collectible fucking boom. Free trial, hit one call in that week, got hired from like a big time group. And just like shop that shit around. And within like 2-3 months, I had like 30, I was working for like 30 groups, giving them the same calls, the same everything. And sort of like broke through. And I saw that and I was like, man, I don't know what I'm doing at all. And like 30 groups are paying me. So I know these other people have no idea what they're doing. And when I came to like NFTs, it was like the same thing. It was like 2021. No one had any.
TG, it was that moment, like in time, it sounds like, where you knew that frequency was going to differentiate.
Absolutely.
You were like, people are making calls once a week. I'm going to do it once a day and then I'm going to shop.
Once a day.
So it was frequency.
And no one knows what they're doing. And that combination, when I come to NFTs, it was like, cool. No one understands this shit. I don't either. I'm going to write about it anyways. And I started writing like more threads than people were doing. So it was like, it was a numbers game for me. It was like, cool. I 10K followers was my number. Cause I was like taking a semester off of school in 2021. I was like, if I can hit 10K by January, which I did, like I can do this for real. And it was a numbers game for me. It was like, cool, go find the most active community. You know, cool cats are popping. Write a thread. I knew every thread got me like 50 followers. So I was like, cool, if I could write, you know, 5 threads a week, get 250 followers, I'll hit 10K by this date. And it was just like a frequency thing. And I remember like when I sort of transitioned from like threads to like shit posting, it was like, cool, I'm going to just tweet 100 times a day. That was my number. I'm going to tweet 100 times a day, replies and tweets. And like, no one was really like doing that. Like it was like the GM thing was a thing, but no one was like flooding the timeline. It was Function was sort of my like North Star because he was doing it. No one else was doing it. So it was like, cool, my tweets suck and I'm not really funny, but I'm just going to like tweet more than you. And by default, Twitter's a numbers game. And so I was like, I'm just going to throw out like as many mid tweets as possible. A couple are going to go viral and I'm just going to grow. And I really think it was like the frequency tied in with like, I don't give a fuck if like the majority of these flop because I know they're going to flop, but like you throw enough shit at the wall, something sticks eventually, right? And that was sort of my approach, like the whole way through.
Yo, and this is kind of full circle, dude, because I don't know if you know this, but it was through listening to your spaces with Alex when you guys were really talking a lot about, you know, the frequency of tweeting and how to grow your account. There was like a aha moment for me. I was like, yo, I'm doing this all wrong. I'm logging onto this app. I'm tweeting like once in the morning, once in the evening. Look at what these MFers are up to, right? And so I got to credit you too, because that awoke in me to like, wait a second, dude, I need to take more interest in how the algorithm works. I need to take more interest in content creation and this stuff. And look, here we are now on a podcast together. You know, I love to see it. So credit to you. I don't know if you know that.
Fuck yeah, I mean, that's great to hear. And honestly, you've been killing it, Faxx. I mean, that's one of the reasons I want to come onto this pod. But the last thing I'll say on frequency is like, look at the rise of Shill and Villain. Like, how did that happen? And why did that happen? And there's a couple reasons. I mean, he like made spaces fun. But bro, there was a time where he was hosting 3 spaces a day, 3 hours a day each, 1,000 concurrent in every space talking about the same topics. Like what? 3 spaces a day. No one was doing no one was doing that. People were maybe hosting Monday through Friday. He was 3 spaces a day, Monday through Sunday. And that was like, whoa, it was like a game changer because it was just like so much was happening in the bull. People wanted to talk about it. His shit was engaging and he was live all day. He was live all day. So it was just like by default, that much airtime, 9, 10 hours of spaces, like you're going to pick up listeners. You're going to pick up fans. You're going to pick up supporters. And that, I mean, that for me too was a little bit of a mindset shift.
Yeah, 100p, dude. So when you look at like let's zoom out from that for a sec, right? So I want to dig into while we have you here. We had board Elon onto space. Sorry, here, let me run this back. So while we got you on here, let me kind of like dig into a little bit more like this tradition phenomenon, because we had board Elon on here on the podcast last episode. And we know the story about how he reached out for trade opportunity and you know, that kind of just blew up into this whole cultural phenomenon, right? And now people are looking at you since you changed your PFP to this Pepin tradition. People are kind of looking at you now almost like as endorsing the visualized value community, or kind of like somebody who is an important influential figure in the visualized value community. I saw that you went when Jack Butcher was doing the prints, the physical prints of the elementals. Sorry, not the elementals, the elements at the actual studio. So it seems like you guys are building a great relationship together.
Actually, sorry, Faxx. Jack should probably do some prints of elementals, you know? Like maybe that could save Azuki if he, oh crap.
So the question is like, where do you see yourself in terms of collaborating with Jack? Like in terms of the visualized value community, like, is this idea like just in people's heads, or is it also in your head that like you want to have some kind of stake in this community and in the next evolutions of what's happening here with Jack Butcher's, just skyrocketing career?
Yeah, I'll say a couple things on that. And the first is, it was pretty poetic because I've been like a pretty hardcore Jack Butcher fan for a minute. I think he came on, I did actually a kick stream with Jack in February. It was a while ago. I did a stream with Jack, and I remember the first 15 minutes before he came on, I'm on there like nervous, I'm shaking. I was like starstruck because when I found Jack through Checks, I had no idea who, never heard of him prior to Checks. It was sort of like a light bulb moment for me. Like I was almost like in awe of this figure and the way he like articulates words and visualizes thoughts. And I saw Jack and was just like immediately drawn to him because I was like, I want to be.
Was it his thought process, TG, or was it something specifically with checks?
I think it was a little like I was amazed by checks, but I was like more drawn to like an 8-word like Jack Butcher tweet just like makes me think for 3 hours, or like how such a simple visual graphic like articulates a thought that I can't even, comprehend. And I was like immediately drawn to Jack because I was like I want to be that. Like I want to like speak like that. I want to like you have a way with words like that. And so saw checks like instantly. I bought a check pretty early, like 0.2 maybe. And I bought a shit ton of Pepins like 0.04 when they were still like the Pepe band. I didn't know what they were, but I was like, I want to talk to this guy, so I'm going to buy his fucking NFTs. And I think I was like instantly drawn to Jack just because as like almost as like a mentor sort of figure. Like I want to like mold into that. I want to like be able to use my words like that. And so it was pretty wild. Like, I mean, I was like in shock when there was, even when he posted like the thread guy Pepin before it was a mint anything, I was like, like what I've never seen like a found or ride for a community member like that. And so like I've been drawn to Jack for a minute, and it's been pretty wild to sort of like build a relationship with him and have a chance to talk deeper with him, meet Jaleel through him with all of this Red Edition stuff. And when you dive deeper into the community and Pepin and checks, you realize like, yo, there's a fuck ton of other people that also feel the same way about Jack and that are gravitated towards like the way that he speaks and his artwork and his creations and his thoughts. And there's a lot of similar like-minded, like it's a very unique community. I mean, there's a lot of like very, very bright, talented people that I've met through it. And it's a community I like being a part of. It quite literally is not, it's so different from the majority of these 10K PFP projects. I will say that honestly, I see like my brand, my PFP as like the Pepin, the Thread Edition. But I also would say like there'll definitely be some PFP changes in the future for sure. Because I felt like one of the reasons that mint was so significant for me is just like I felt like I was like stuck, for a lack of a better word, to the mutant PFP. And like not to give it a negative connotation, like that was my brand the whole way. And the mutant honestly played a big role in sort of like leveling up my crypto Twitter game and in my network and who I knew, because in 2021 that was a thing. It was like your PFP like really mattered. It doesn't really matter anymore. It really did matter at the time. And I almost felt like I had been thinking rebrand for months at this point before the Thread Edition. Like I've been thinking rebrand. Is it a picture of my face? Like what is it? Is it a color? Like what do I do? But I was like stuck. I just couldn't come up with a scenario where it like made sense and it was like a seamless transition. But like Jack did it for me. And I think at the same time, Jack did it for a shit ton of other people who also just like changed their PFPs doing a Pepin for like 48 hours just because they could. And it was fun. And it was like the cool thing to do. And so I don't want to like lose sight of the fact that that was like a pivotal moment for me as well, that it was like, yo, like I knew it deep down that like you're not your PFP. Like I'm the brand. My voice is the brand. My face is the brand, not the PFP. But until it's like literally done in practice, it's like a tough realization to come to. Like people always like clown on like getting attached to a JPEG, but it's real. Like it's fucking real. You get stuck to this image. Like that was the whole bull run, the whole bear run. Like when I think thread guy, when you think thread guy, it's like the mutant PFP. So that was like a big moment for me to be able to like literally visualize I'm the brand, not the PFP. So I would say that there will definitely be some PFP changes in the future, but I, especially after Threaded Edition, like think of myself as like a core community member in that community. And I think Jack Butcher is someone that I intentionally have wanted to align with for a while. And so it was pretty poetic the way that like all of those factors tied in into just like a fucking lightning in a bottle, man.
Yo, the thing is, TG, I'm realizing Like for you to be able to articulate those authentic thoughts, it just it shows how humble you are. And I think that that is like part of like the likability and attractiveness that you have to so much of your audience. I think like we, now that everything's become more digitally native, like think about like what that looks like and how that started with Instagram. And Instagram, it's like all fake, bro. You see these people, they're flashing this, they're flashing their life, they're flashing their wife behind the scenes. It's like, none of that's real, bro. People want authenticity. And for you to be able to like articulate something like that about Jack and how you kind of like appreciate and like look up to him and want to learn from him, essentially, that speaks volumes about your character. And one person that I know who's absolutely attached to JPEGs is Goodmonth Eth, who just can't, seem to, part ways with these bags of JPEGs that he has. But he's also like always been bullish on rebrands. Ever since I talked to Good, like from the get-go, he's like, yeah, rebrand, fuck it. So Good, like, what is it that you think about rebrands, and like, why are you bullish on this concept? And like, when you contextualize that with like TG as a brand.
Yeah, because I mean, TG mentioned it that the PFP really mattered in 21, and that was for a reason. The reason was no one knew what the fuck was going on. It was a brand new space that was popping off, and it did matter what your PFP was because you kind of had to stake your legitimacy. And what I mean by that is like if you were willing to put up, if you were willing either to put up 10K for a PFP or hold something that appreciated to 10K and not sell it, it sent a signal to the followers. It sent a signal to the space that like you're here for a reason. You're not just here to make money because you would have already done that or you wouldn't have spent that. So that's why it mattered. But I think to your question, and to parlay it into that point, rebrands matter because cultural metas shift so much and we're always behind. We're always playing catch up. Like if you are on the TL in real time and you're grokking information as it's happening, you're late. You're having a reaction. And then if you're able to grok it and deduce what's actually happening in that moment, then you're fast, but you're still reacting. Nobody is out in front of everything and you really can't be. And so the only way to signal to people that, hey, I'm changing and I'm going a new direction is a rebrand. Otherwise, it's just fucking words. It's just words that people don't actually understand. And we're in an era right now where we're kind of past the information era. Like we'll always be in this information era and we're moving into this digital asset era. And I don't mean digital asset as collectibles or NFTs. I mean what DGods has done. Like DGods actually puts out fire rebrands. For 3 years, they've been at it and they've rebranded. Whether we see it as a rebrand or not, they're still DGods, D this, D that. They've changed up their logo 3-5 times. And it's operating on people. When they go to New York and they do DGods week and they do DGods hotel, they got an experience. They like just point it back to DGods. They got to go back to that. Make people feel things. Do the movies. Do the rebrands. Do things where people feel like they're getting new experiences, almost like a digital vacation. And I think that goes for people who are also, professionals in the space like TG. Like they, TG needs to re-up his brand if he wants to signal a new direction, even if it's just a degree, right? Like you're young, TG. One day you're gonna decide like, I'm not fucking young anymore. Like I'm doing this, right? And that calls for a rebrand. And along the way, you're gonna just pivot degrees every which way. Especially, I want to talk about your AIP. If your AIP passes, that's a huge fucking unlock. That deserves a rebrand. In fact, when you go and edit the AIP, throw in some fucking dollars for a rebrand, because that does cost money and you will need that because this is a new lens. And I actually think people will, take to that budget request pretty well if you realize that this is a big endeavor for you. It is a big new chapter, and you do deserve a rebrand.
Yeah, I do think we should pivot over to this AIP and just like kind of ApeCoin DAO conversation a little bit. Goodmonth Labs, we put forth an AIP. The experience that we had was like it kind of it kind of didn't go anywhere for a minute. We were kind of in the dark, and then suddenly it was live. Like we weren't aware, and the voting window was short, and we didn't really like have the opportunity to articulate our vision and talk to enough people about it. And then we just got like crushed, and we got blown out. And like, it is what it is. And like, Goodmonth is like a diehard MFer. He's gonna absolutely dial up like the next iteration of AIP based on the feedback that we got, but we got blown out, right? Board Elon, he ran for the special counsel, he lost. You ran for the special counsel, you lost. Like, what's up with the DAO? Like, is there like just ultimately a big gap between what we think is important in the attention economy, in the community network, the discussions, and the people holding the tokens and who just want to protect the tokens? Like, I want to get takes for both of you guys. So I want to first go to Good. You've been in BAYC from the jump. You've been holding apes, other assets. You've been supportive of the community. You've done, I feel like from my perspective, a lot to lift up the community. That wasn't necessarily like reciprocated in this experience of this AIP. Like, what do you think went wrong? What's your plan moving forward?
Yeah, and that's okay. It's not reciprocated. That's the point of decentralized aspects and community, and getting consensus. So just first and foremost, like, I don't have a bitter taste in my mouth at all. If anything, it's just like I have a lot of takes that I want to iterate on and make it better. But I mean, to your point, there's a bifurcation right now happening with the ApeCoin DAO, and there's a disconnect with that bifurcation, meaning they're going two different directions. So there's one sentiment where people are, asked to hold one ApeCoin for a vote. Well, the more ApeCoin you have, the more votes you get. And that's typical. I mean, that's an asset-backed voting mechanism for DAO structures, and that's been around. The issue is that we've slid into a massive bear market, and ApeCoin just continues to go down. Staking is live for bake and make holders, and they are selling their rewards the minute they get them. There's a ton of sell pressure. It's not the hold pressure that they had originally expected or wanted. And then the unlocks are happening. And because it's a bear market, all investors that are due ApeCoin on these unlocks are damping them, right? So you have people in the DAO that are working. They're actually working full time and putting a lot of time into this, and they're getting paid in ApeCoin, and they're holding their ApeCoin because they have conviction and they want to vote and they want to have a loud voice in this ApeCoin DAO. Their USD monetary value is dropping fast. So what that is incentivizing them to do is not let go of any ApeCoin that comes out of the treasury. So anything, we did our research prior to putting our AIP in. Basically anything over 80K got flooded to shit for no reason except it's high dollar spend, and then the recursive supply, then the repetitive replies come in where they start picking apart your dollar amounts, and then they eventually ask you to take it in ApeCoin, and then they eventually ask you to take it in ApeCoin over periods of time because they don't want the coin to leave the treasury, because they think that holding this coin in the treasury is going to make number go up. Here's the truth. The truth of the matter is coin will always go down if the coin doesn't get adoption and it doesn't get ubiquity. If a bull run pops off and ApeCoin is nowhere to be heard and nowhere to be seen, and it's not well branded, and Chainlink goes off through the moon and Polygon goes off through the moon, no one's buying ApeCoin. So it's not necessarily true, right, that when a bull happens, everything follows. There are clear dark horses that win in a bull on the altcoin side. So that's my real big takeaway out of this thing is like, what is smart for the ApeCoin DAO is not necessarily backed by the people who are voting for monetary behaviors that are just unrealistic in this time.
That's a take, dude. If it's not heard and it's not seen when the next bull market comes around, it can be left behind. It can be left behind. If you're holding big bags of ApeCoin and you just want the ApeCoin to sit in the fucking DAO, it's going to go to zero.
There's a perfect coin to do that. It's called Bitcoin. Go sit on it. Everyone sits on it. And I love Bitcoin. I hold Bitcoin. And what do I do with it? I fucking sit on it. And I don't spend it. And I don't want people to spend it.
So what's cooking good? If you guys, TG, if you could give us like a little bit of like kind of recap of, look, I thought that you were going to get voted in as a special council member. You didn't. How did you take that? How did you respond to that?
So I have a lot of thoughts. So forgive me if it's not a take. It's just a fucking brain dump, but maybe a therapy vent session. But first of all, I followed your AIP more surface level until it was like pretty late, but I really respect what you all are doing, and I think you could have a major impact. And I ran for the special counsel, and I fully ran. You know, my tagline was bringing the culture back, and I fully ran on this angle that this should, could, and would be the most powerful and respected DAO in this space for various reasons. Treasury being a huge one. But nobody cares about it because nobody knows about it, and no one knows about it because no one cares about it. And it's like this pretty like brutal double whammy here, where it's like there's so much locked potential within this DAO, but we can't even reach the people we need to reach to then onboard to utilize the only resource, the only leverage the DAO has, which is the treasury. And there's like a major onboarding and communication problem. Quite frankly, it doesn't happen, right? Outside of election season, no one on the timeline is ever talking about the ApeCoin DAO. And so I ran, and I finished second in the first round and got wrecked in the last round, which is like a whole nother thing we could like spend some time on as to why that happened. However, I felt like, for me, like I felt like my thread and my campaign was like a case study for what I personally could do for this DAO. And I felt like there was like a week, 7 days, maybe less, maybe more, that like vote TG and like the ApeCoin DAO was like the topic on the timeline. Like everyone was talking about it. Everyone was hosting spaces. Everyone was writing content about it. And it wasn't enough to get me voted through. Again, a lot of thoughts on that, but whatever. Maybe I wasn't the perfect role for the special counsel. And the commentary was like, yo, what the special counsel does is going to like sort of bottleneck you from being yourself. We don't want you on the special counsel. We want you involved. Like, go submit a fucking AIP. And so we did. We submitted an AIP idea, and we threw it up, and we basically promised like this show. We're gonna have editors. We're gonna do the whole thing. We're gonna like bring some life back to this thing on Spaces, because quite frankly, like it has to become like I think people get lost in the numbers way too much, and they're like, oh well, you know, the Space only averages 1,500 listeners. Like that's nothing. But what I think people don't understand is like crypto Twitter in its shadow of its former self form is still everything, and controlling the crypto Twitter narrative is still everything. And I think DeGods alone is that. Like, let's pre-season 3 drop, the ramp up, the hype, the 10 ETH floor, like that was from dominating crypto Twitter. Like it started in like that's what that was. Is like they dominated the narrative on crypto Twitter. ApeCoin DAO didn't lose a narrative on crypto Twitter. They don't even have a narrative on crypto Twitter. I think that's the biggest problem. And like all of the feedback sort of that, or not, I don't want to say all, but the majority of the feedback that's been received on this idea is like $35,000 a month. Are you out of your fucking mind? Like we could pay a TikToker to shill ApeCoin every day for a week for that price with 1 million followers. And I'm like, you could, but like where, like if you could, but like where's the disconnect here? Like, there's some comments that are along the lines of like, we don't need a spaces show. Everyone that remotely there's a comment, everyone that remotely knows about the Yuga IP is involved in the DAO in some capacity. No, they're not. No, they are not. Like it could not be the furthest thing from the truth. Like no, they are not.
The biggest delegates, the people who have the most ApeCoin to vote, don't even come in and vote.
Don't even
on
vote.
Every AIP. So like that's all you need to do to bat that shit out.
It was shocking. One, talking to the whales during the special council elections. I didn't even know. They're like, well, I don't even know what's special council. I don't even know what's happening. One, and then two was how many people on spaces that I talked to. I'm talking like hundreds of people that are like, wait, you're telling me I can participate without owning a Bored Ape? Like that's a thing? I can like vote in this DAO without owning a Bored Ape? So I think that there's this like overarching disconnect that the hardcore contributors that are in the forums think that everybody else is like watching what is happening in the ApeCoin DAO and cares about what is happening in the ApeCoin DAO because it's the ApeCoin DAO and Yuga Labs is huge. Obviously they're separate, but they're separate. And Yuga is runs the space and everyone is just like all eyes on this DAO. And it's just like not the case whatsoever. It's like not the case whatsoever.
It's a tragedy of commons situation. Like tragedy of commons essentially means, it's like the Spider-Man meme where Spider-Mans are pointing at Spider-Man because everyone thinks everyone else is doing it. And so because everyone thinks everyone else is in the DAO doing the things the DAO is supposed to be doing, actually nobody is because everybody thinks that everyone else has got it taken care of.
And here's the last thing I'll say on it is, there's this like narrative that we're building long term. The money is better spent putting, systems in place for success long term. And I had this narrative that I kept coming back to during the elections. And I'm like, I'm all for like long term success in 3-4 years. The metaverse is a 3-4 year, 5-year play. The other side's a 5-year play. But like, what part are you not understanding that if we don't survive tomorrow, there is no long term? Right? Long-term doesn't exist if we don't exist in a month, quite frankly. And my narrative to a lot of these whales, and I guess you can't talk about price in the elections publicly, but privately, my narrative to these whales is like, look, you hold multiple millions of dollars in ApeCoin. You're down like 90% in the last year. Nothing has happened that anyone cares about publicly in the last 6 months of the DAO. And it's like, if you are not happy with what's happened in the special council, like why would you not throw someone in there to shake this shit up? Because the reality is ApeCoin cannot take 6 more months of nothing. It just like it can't withstand another year of just like grinding down day over day over day. So it's like if something doesn't happen now, because here's like the brutal reality is token of the metaverse, and the metaverse doesn't even exist. Is just like, if that's the narrative, like we're the token of the metaverse, like what is the metaverse? Sandbox and Decentraland and the other side that have no success and don't exist. It's like, if that's the narrative, like we're in a really tough spot. Like if we're the token of the metaverse and power the metaverse, like what is that exactly, right? Like what is that? And the reality of the situation is another 6 months, another year of nobody talking or caring about ApeCoin, no AIPs passed that like move the needle forward socially. It's like day over day, price drops and the DAO loses its only leverage, which is the treasury. Because like, quite frankly, it's just like, that's the leverage. That's the edge, is the DAO has a lot of money. And every day that the price drops, the DAO has less money and less leverage and less power. And that it isn't like the brand is going to like save this thing. It's like, no. It's like, there's literally a dollar figure. And the more that goes down, the less power this DAO has, the less influence it has, the less people care about what we're doing already. And I feel like it's a combination of a few things, but there's so much chatter about this like we're building long term, we're building 5 years, but like my brother, 5 years doesn't exist if tomorrow doesn't exist. And that like, I'm not entirely sure what it is, but I feel like there is just a mega disconnect on the importance of like the crypto Twitter narrative and getting people to care. And this is the last thing I'll say is something I talked about a lot is that Jonah Blake submitted an AIP idea because of my campaign. And like, did he go to the DAO and ask for $20 million and like a crazy proposal? Like, yes. But what you have to understand is like, that is not happening. Like these people, these smart people, these voices that are respected in their space are not being onboarded because they don't fucking know about it. And people were like angry at me for highlighting the fact that like I onboarded him into the DAO. But I'm like, you don't realize this isn't happening. Like, people are not like learning about the ApeCoin DAO, getting excited, coming through and submitting proposals. Like, look, read the fuck, you guys read it, read the ideas and read the proposals. They're all Bored Ape holders. They're all like hardcore contributors that have 100 hours in the DAO. Like, this is the last thing I'll say on my event is I took a lot of heat during my campaign because they're like, oh, you only have like 4 hours read in the forums. Like, why would we vote for someone that doesn't have 100 hours read? I'm like, this is the problem. Like, the underlying problem with this DAO is that you think the people that should have the most say are the ones that have the most time spent in this echo chamber forum. Like,
yeah, I mean, look at the way democracy works in America, right? Is like people don't give a shit until it's voting season, and when it's voting season, the organizations that take grant money from the government to go get voter adoption for their measurements, for whatever they're doing. And I couldn't agree with the sentiment that you have any more than I do, because some of the pushback that I got all the time was like, do you really want to engage people into this DAO that aren't involved in grinding every day? I'm like, yeah, it's called outside perspective. It's called someone who maybe has a strength over here that can pour fuel on the fire for these initiatives and just go out and rope one for the team, right? I mean, there's serious and significant problems there. So I put feedback on your AIP, basically like outlining these success metrics, because once you do that, you'll be able to smash out the park. Nobody in those fucking replies to your AIP, you'll notice nobody offers their help. They give you shade and they want to see your response and they want to be a keyboard warrior, but they won't offer you for help. So I'm on air saying, dude, my reply, reach out to me. I'll fucking write those success metrics for you. Like, I'll put together a plan to help you do that, because that's the only way we're going to get this shit over the line. And when you need to socialize your AIP, I'll be in the fucking Mochaverse Discord making sure that you get that $1.9 million votes. And if I have to buy a goddamn mocha to do it, I'm going to do it.
I mean, I'll say this. This is the last thing, that last comment is just like, it's like a little demoralizing. Because like, here's the thing. If you want to like FUD the dollar number, like FUD the dollar number, that's fine. It's just like a little demoralizing where it's like, I just had my like campaign. It was like, in my opinion, of course, I'm going to like gas myself, but in my opinion, that's the most attention the DAO has like gotten ever. And I just like ran this campaign. Every single person is like, submit an AIP, submit an AIP, submit an, like, we need you, we need you, we need you, we need you. And then it like becomes time to submit an AIP. And people are like, well, you know, well, why don't you just join ApeComs? Or like, why don't you just this? Why don't you just that? And I'm like, do you all want this or not? You know what I mean? Like, do you feel like you need this or not? Because respectfully, if you don't, like, we'll go fuck off and go somewhere else. If it doesn't, like, if you don't feel like you need this, like, fine. I don't have the voting power to decide if it goes through or not. But it's just like demoralizing to like run an entire campaign on this angle that like the DAO needs fucking attention. It needs to be a topic of discussion. It needs to be a headliner. People need to care about this. Have everyone collectively agree and be like, yes, you are right. And you just showed us the impact in public. And then you go to the AIP and they're like, well, you know, Thread Guy just has a Twitter space. What can he really do? I'm like, well, respectfully, I just showed you what I could really do for the ApeCoin DAO. It wasn't like I showed you Thread Edition. It wasn't like I showed you something else. It was like I showed you ApeCoin DAO specifically, what this looks like. And there's still like, well, you know, we could spend this on Metaverse shit. And it's just like, I don't know. I just don't get it.
Yeah, the proof is there. There is absolutely value to impressions, to views, to conversations, to discussions. I think though, when we zoom out though, like ultimately it's like this is a human experiment, dude. People are just engineered in the last, 50 years and probably before that to like do everything in their power to hoard money and keep money for themselves. And they have an inability they have a bias against releasing that money and can't get over the hump of understanding of how in orders of magnitude, this can actually help their money go up.
They don't want to release the money, but you don't realize the money is burning anyways. Release it or not release it, it's dropping anyways, right? Like
you're losing it due to impermanent
whether
loss.
you hoard it all or you give it all out, it's the same thing is happening.
But also, TG, like hoarding it and having the value go down also permeates another risk, which is it's not getting more decentralized. The risk of staying less decentralized and giving these funds out is that it does have an opportunity of getting a Wells notice and getting shut down. Like it needs more third parties getting grants and building things outside of it, because if it gets too insulated, then it's NGMI from a regulatory standpoint.
Here's my last comment on the ApeCoin DAO. We could probably have a whole
I think we need to start a podcast just called "My Last Comment" on the ApeCoin DAO.
I mean it this time, though. We could do a whole thing rehashing the elections, but the one like rude awakening I had during the elections, because I'm out here on Spaces, one ape is one vote. Like you just need one ape to support me. The reality is, the brutal reality is your one ape is meaningless, and it was sort of my first experience in like lobbying and politics, so like maybe I should have known better. But what I realized like the hard way was there's like ballpark, I got the sheet here somewhere, there's ballpark like 25 30 wallets that matter, and that's it 25 to 30 wallets that matter, and you would take like everybody else combined to like make 31, and whoever can get support from the most out of the 25 to 30 wallets that matter wins, and whoever can loses. And it had nothing to do with unique voters. It had nothing to do with like total support and social support. It was like, who can sway the most of the 25 to 30 wallets? And like newsflash, every single one of those wallets has an agenda. And in the special council elections, it's like, cool, I got 3 million votes. That's $6 million USD. I will vote for you, but like, what will you do for me? And that was sort of like a tough wall that maybe I should have expected that, but didn't expect. And I'll say like, I don't know, played a decent role in finishing second in the first round and last in the second round is what I'll say on that.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think like, yes, everyone has their agenda, but the one big thing is like bags can be built and momentum can be taken. It's going to take a long time. But I'm glad, like, I'm sorry you didn't get selected for the special counsel. In hindsight, and I said this on a podcast a couple episodes, like, I'm glad you did it because you'd be muzzled. You'd have NDAs on you right now. You'd be boring. And to be honest, like, your X factor is that you're one of a kind, like you're one of one. And so tuning into your spaces and watching how you actively learn, watching how you actively engage, and now hearing the story of, you going into that trade or the card trading biz and like reading up on Cool Cats and these threads and regurgitating the threads that you did. I mean, you read, dude, you're smart. You can get into it. You can figure it out. And I think that, going back to the rebrand or like something like that, because people think if they don't spend a lot of time with you, they think Thread Guy yells on Spaces. They don't know the real you. Like, I don't know I don't know your real name, but they don't know the real you. And I just think like people need to fuck around and find out on you a little bit, because I think you're built for something great in this space. And I think that you can make people think different. I know you aspire to be a Jack Butcher. You might not have the like design capabilities unless you want to grow them, but you definitely have the mental models to be able to be a Jack Butcher of words.
Thank you.
And so I think that, I think you really can lead a change here. And I think you can lead a change of sentiment over the space. And honestly, if they don't pass your AIP, price might just have to go up each time. And you're not going to go away. So that's the fucking
Let's
thing.
go.
Like we've had Board G on this, and we were talking with Board G after he got elected. And one thing he said is he's just like, a lot of people don't have a lot of business acumen in there. And so they write these proposals, they get stomped out and they go away. Well, you have business acumen because I've heard you say edge and leverage like 17 times on this podcast. You understand differentiators. So you just keep hitting them with that business acumen and you grow your business acumen in there. Like, it doesn't fucking take time to copy and paste an AIP and resubmit. Like, they're going to have to deflate you if they want you to go away. And I can tell you that's not going to happen. So this is yours in the bag. And, we will do everything we can to help support that and reach out on the side as well. But the 8.0 needs a change. And if anyone says like, oh, the fucking Never Fade podcast is now on their tip because AIP 268 failed, motherfucking yeah, it is. And I'm not bitter that I didn't win, but I'm bitter as fuck if we're turning down shit that needs to be approved.
I fucking agree. And here's the one thing I'll say on like selfishly, the best part of the Pepin saga was like when the board offer first came through and it kind of went viral and got a ton of publicity. There was like all these, because Pepin MFers are like a little more sophisticated, probably skew older. And there's like all these comments that are like, I don't get the hype. Like the kid just like screams on spaces, yada, 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 yada. And then like watching in real time, people turn as we like went through it and then closed it with like the Jack Butcher interview. And like the same people that were like, yo, I'm gonna be honest, like I didn't give you a chance at all at the beginning. I was like, thought this was bullshit, but I listened, and like I get it now. And now like that was pretty cool to see in like real time from like a community I really respect.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Yo, Good's got the flowers for TG. Michael Jerome, say his name. Thanks for coming on the Never Fade podcast. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your takes. I think there's a lot of good vibes and energy in the room right now, and that's what we need to get through this bear market. So let's go ahead and wrap it up here, boys. TG, any kind of departing words for us here?
I just want to thank you all, man. I think it's the first podcast since the Thread edition, but I saw you Faxx and I was like, yo, I gotta fucking come on. Y'all run a great show. Shout out to you, Good. Shout out to you, Faxx. One of the better fucking podcasts I've ever been on. So I really appreciate the time. I appreciate the thought as well. Like not coming with the same linear stuff, like really preparing and like thinking through this. Like I recognize it as a Spaces host. I appreciate it. So thank you all.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, appreciate you. Ultimately, like we're all so deep in this and have so much experience and knowledge with the nuance that is Web3 that hopefully, our listeners here will appreciate the time that we put in today. So I know you probably got to jump on some spaces. We'll definitely see you on the timeline. Much love.
Ain't gonna catch me without a roof over my head, verifying everything. That's a bad bet if the bags check less. About to burn back to back, flipping not G when that Jenny duh hits. That's the race to 250 in the world and you chose to sleep. That's a bad bet if you wake up checkless. No more people without bags, yet they need status. Running head first with the VV check thirst. Never heard of a hearse, but they connecting the dots.